and welcome to Reimagine 2021, brought to you by MouseBelt. I'm your co-host, Ashlie Meredith, and today we're bringing you version 9.0 of our virtual conference series, Game of Chains. We're exploring all the latest innovations in Bitcoin, Ethereum, and asking, will a new chain soon take the throne? And if so, who will it be? I'm excited to be joined by Gehrig Kunz. He does product marketing at Hedera and also works with their startup program, advising 100 projects contributing to the ecosystem. Welcome, Gehrig. How are you doing today?
Hey, Ashlie. I'm doing great. Thanks so much for having me. And I'm excited to debate on Game of Change. It'll be a fun one.
Yes, thank you so much for being here. So tell everyone tuning in what you do at Hedera. We're talking about kind of the third generation of blockchains. Everyone's really familiar with Bitcoin and Ethereum, been coming under fire lately for maybe not being environmentally sustainable, having all these high gas fees. And so I think everyone's kind of looking out what might be the new chain, what makes Hedera different.
Yeah, absolutely. There's definitely an air of that, and people talking about if the sustainability and gas prices of Ethereum are sustainable, what makes it work? Are people willing to adopt that? So many good questions there, and I think Hedera solves a lot of them, to be honest with you. We are the most used public ledger today for what I would call real world adoption. And applications and businesses are often looking to us for a number of reasons, at the foremost of which is really the governance model and the technology itself. Now, certainly when it comes to the technology, we're extremely efficient, both in terms of cost, but also sustainability and the efficiency of the network. So we have our own consensus algorithm called Hashgraph, you might be familiar with. And it is extremely efficient with transactions up to 10,000 transactions per second, costing a fraction of a cent, and being extremely environmentally friendly as well, with very low utility usage for each of those transactions. So it's all of that coupled together that is a good kind of technical reason that people are coming to us. The transactions reach finality in 3 seconds, which is also incredibly powerful if you're familiar with the space. And then second to that is really our governing model, which is quite unique in the space and even controversial at times. So we are governed, our decentralized network is governed by a set of term limited organizations from around the world. These organizations range from the Googles of the world to the University of College London and many others. We anticipate being about 39 of these organizations over time. And they're really, guiding the network, running our initial set of nodes before we become permissionless and doing a lot of work with us. So we're really excited about that. And I think those are the two biggest reasons that people are looking to Hedera.
Yeah, so you said that Hedera is the chain for real world use cases. What did you mean by that?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, I personally look at this space as kind of moving in two directions, right? We have the more decentralized applications, the decentralized finance aspect of things that are coming online, starting to really innovate and disrupt a lot of the world. At the same time, we're seeing a massive amount of interest from more centralized applications, processes, enterprises, governments, central issuing authorities that want to start to bring more decentralization into their process. Whether that's for transparency, trust, verification, there's an interest there, and we're starting to see that emerge too. And really, we're starting to see those two worlds start to collide, which is really interesting and something I expect we'll see more of in the future. But that initial starting point of building a centralized application, wanting greater transparency or trust within it, I would say is really the sweet spot for Hedera today. And so we're seeing a number of kind of high throughput use cases that are more standard applications in terms of IoT monitoring or advertising, typical industry built applications like the Coupon Bureau, for instance, is a great example. They're a nonprofit organization in the US that's really started out of the retail industry. So some of the biggest players in the space, Procter & Gamble, et cetera, all participate in this and identify coupon standards. So they are using Hedera today in the real world to really identify if the state of that coupon is still valid or not. And in doing so, trying to reduce the amount of fraud that takes place, which is hundreds of millions of dollars annually in the US alone. So it's applications like that that are, kind of bridging this gap between, this decentralized world that we're all excited about and kind of the mainstream population that I think is a really good fit for Hedera and where we're at today.
Absolutely. And it looks like about a week ago, the mainnet was upgraded and it was kind of billed as this is a move to more decentralization for Hedera. So for people just tuning in, thanks for tuning in to Reimagine 2021. Go check out our YouTube channel, hit the subscribe button, tons of videos there. But last month, we did an NFT event, and I think there's just so many new people coming into the space. Could you talk a little bit about like why decentralization is important and how Hedera is becoming more decentralized?
Yeah, so that's a big question, right? Decentralization is important in itself, in that it kind of acts as a neutral party for all transactions, and so you don't have to trust a single party. You can trust, the entirety of the network to process that transaction and start to do some really interesting things with it. Of course, this kind of started as cryptocurrency, but it can be evolved to a ton more things and a ton more use cases, like the coupon bureau example, right? Which is, kind of boring in nature, but still exciting to decentralize that process and get greater trust and transparency and verifiability through, any existing process. For Hedera, we want to be the most decentralized network at scale. Currently today, for some context, we are a permissioned public network. So our nodes are permissioned and run by those initial council members. So this is the IBMs, Deutsche Telekoms, Googles of the world that are running our initial infrastructure. Last week, we added Chainlink to our governing council, and they're the most recent node that we brought online. Over time, we plan to be a permissionless network so that anybody in the world can run these nodes and contribute to consensus, earn HBAR for doing so, et cetera. The reason that's so important is because, we don't want any single party to be able to manipulate transactions, be able to do anything, wrong with the network or malicious. So the greater amount of people participating in the network, the better it is for everyone. And we have a, pretty clear roadmap in order to get there. So we're starting, public permission, but we'll be extending to being a public permissionless network pretty quickly here in terms of blockchain in the next, I would imagine, 5 to 10 years, depending on how we're going.
Absolutely. Well, speaking of the roadmap, where is Hedera on its roadmap and what is the next milestone?
Yeah, Hedera is a relatively young network. We launched in the fall of 2019, and even though we have some of the most transaction volume that exists on any public network, we are still early. And since 2019, we've added some really interesting features and functionality, like the Hedera consensus service that many applications are taking advantage of, and is the majority of our volume today. In addition to that, in, I believe, February or so, we launched the Hedera token service, which makes it really easy to mint and manage tokens natively on Hedera. As we look forward, we're not even at version 1.0 of our network yet, which is really exciting. And so we have exciting features and functionality coming out over the next year, which ranges from, developer improvements. We have a really active community of developers that are contributing suggestions to our code base and improvements called Hedera improvement proposals. An example of those that are kind of coming out over the pipeline is NFT support kind of more broadly, as well as native royalty payments, which is really interesting. The ability to, codify that within code. So every time you exchange that token, X, Y, and Z recipients can earn from that exchange is really cool and exciting for a lot of, creator economies and the like. And even like zero knowledge proofs, I think there's a Hedera improvement proposal for out there. And so there's a lot of exciting, developer-oriented features at the same time. There's a lot of network level stuff that we are looking forward to as well. This ranges from sharding, which is on our hedera.com/roadmap that you can see, to improving our node operations and making it easier for some of our nodes to come online and reconnect and start to get us to that more decentralized, permissionless aspects of the network that we're all looking forward to.
Yeah, I think that the stuff you're doing with the Hedera token service is so interesting and probably really interesting to our viewers who joined us for our NFT event.
Sure.
I think that's kind of the ultimate goal of NFTs, is the ability, like, could we actually code in royalties to artwork and stuff like that. So with the Hedera token service, you're able to mint and manage fungible and non-fungible tokens without a smart contract. Can you explain that to viewers who are just learning about smart contracts, and why this kind of offering would be beneficial?
Absolutely. Yeah. So like, most of the things that Hedera does, we do it a little bit uniquely to the rest of the market. Part of the reason for tokens for us is we wanted to make them as accessible to the mainstream developers and businesses as possible. So instead of, learning a whole new language, we support tokens natively using JavaScript or Java or Go. So making it really easy for, any developer to really get up to speed on this exciting technology and start to put it into practice. Not only do we make it easier, but we also improve it in some ways. So we don't have kind of the concept of gas fees and variability that comes with tokens on Ethereum, for instance. So we recently had a pretty cool application called Infinite by Suku that migrated from Ethereum to Hedera to cut down on those variable gas fees. So instead of, I think it was $80 at the time for creating a token on Ethereum, it cost a flat US dollar fee on us for, $1 to create that token type, which is really compelling for, obvious reasons, right? Especially as we start to see more interesting use cases of tokens and kind of the micro payment functionality within there that we might be, talking more about later today. But not only are they cheaper, but they're faster, right? We can get token transactions the native speed of the network. So we can do about 10,000 transactions per second with the Hedera token service. And transaction transfers, again, always cost, a thousandth of a penny. So not only is it cheaper to mint them, but to actually use them is cheaper as well, which is really exciting. And also energy efficiency is, of course, paramount too. And so every transaction is, as efficient really as our native cryptocurrency transactions, which is, I believe, let me see the numbers right here, 0.00017 kilowatt hours per each transaction, which is, quite an order of magnitude difference than some of these alternative networks.
Absolutely. So you brought up Suku, and we actually interviewed them last month for our NFT event, and they're in the luxury goods space, and we talked a lot about the need for traceability and authentication, and why blockchain is particularly suited for something like that. And they did mention, yes, that they had moved off of Ethereum onto Hedera. So speaking of like some of these projects that are being built on Hedera, you are kind of oversee the startup program at Hedera. You said you were advising 100 projects. They're all building on Hedera. Can you talk some about, your experience dealing with teams and what they're looking for and why they're building on Hedera, and some of the most exciting projects that you've seen?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think, for starters, I think it's important to address that Hedera gets often bucketed as like this enterprise solution. And we really don't want it to be that, right? We want this to be a technology that anybody can take advantage of, this new kind of trust layer of the internet. And so we definitely want to be able to support startups and individual developers and open source projects on our network, and provide a number of resources in order to better do that. As far as our startup program goes, we do have about 100 plus overall projects within the program. These, of course, have a wide range of the types of characters and ability and size of the project, ranging from this great high schooler that built a wallet to some venture-backed funded companies with growing employee sizes. So it's really neat to work with such a wide group of people that are excited about this technology and start to explore some interesting and exciting ways to do that. One project that's rolling out just this week actually is Seun, SEUN.io, I believe, is their website if you want to check them out. And so they're an IoT water monitoring solution. And so they're working with some of the government within California and installing some device sensors to monitor the quality of our water. So they're, an IoT device that sends out this data to the Hedera public ledger. And by doing that, we can start to have more verifiable evidence and monitoring, by a wide group of people that are able to see just how good or bad quality of our water might be. So it's some really good projects that are, ranging from that to open source projects and protocols that are starting to build bridges across other networks. So we see, a really wide range of things. I think, often when people come to this blockchain and distributed ledger space, I think there's a lot of kind of misnomers that they need to get around first and try to understand where this technology can actually fit into a solution. And so we do work with often with the founders and trying to identify like, what is the problem that we're actually trying to solve here and where does it matter? Does it need to do, this, or does it need to do that? Can it just be the centralized process? How can we start to adopt this technology in the right ways is really important for all of us at Hedera. And I think we have a good group of startups and enterprises alike that are starting to really understand that and have that model really mature over time.
Absolutely. So anyone tuning in who is maybe considering building on Hedera, what kind of support do these startups receive? Do you do any grant programs? Are they able to get funding or HBAR to start deploying applications? You yourself or your team, or mentorship opportunities, can they get on a call with you? How does that work?
Yeah, absolutely. So we're, really accessible overall as a team. So if anybody's interested in our startup program, they can apply at hedera.com/boost. And we try to be as accepting as possible and still create a really good and positive experience for them. The program itself is very simple, especially in our early days, where we have a number of categories that we think is the most important to help these projects. These primarily are, first and foremost, technical support. Can we make sure you're as unblocked as possible, using the right best practices? Can we make sure you're successful? Beyond that, we do a number of kind of BD and marketing related elements to make sure that, can you bring this to market? Can we help support you? Whether that's introductions to some of our council members or other projects in the space to help develop a really positive ecosystem around it. That's certainly an angle for us that we try to be as supportive as we can on. And the last is a small amount of funding to cover the initial transaction fees. So right now we're issuing $1,000 a month on a 3-month basis to any projects that are ready to go to the mainnet. And while that should be more than enough to cover those initial transaction fees, given the cost we've talked about, we just want to make sure that they can kind of confidently deploy this thing, test it out, prove out any hypothesis they have without burning a hole in their pockets, which of course for most of these startups is really important at that stage. Beyond that, I think there are some rumors of a larger grant program rolling out, and I expect to listen, keep an eye out for more from Hedera on that in the future.
Absolutely. And I think some of the MouseBelt team has done some advising sessions with these Boost program, Stellar as well. They have a grant and a lab fund and will advise those projects. Just getting on a call with these startups and, taking a look at their pitch deck, finding out whether they're putting their best foot forward for like a pitch competition or if they're trying to get funding in some way, like really enjoy talking to startups and just giving them any kind of perspective or advice, or really drilling down on are you actually solving a problem, or are you just tacking blockchain onto something that doesn't need it, and all of those kinds of problems. But this is born out. So we're an accelerator. We want to see more innovation in the space. One of the ways that we do that is investing in education and universities, funding development classes in blockchain at UCLA, for example. And so I ran the university program for many years. We've been in touch with 100 universities in 24 countries. Any students tuning in, encourage you to go check out mousebelt.university. But I always like to ask people, what was your background? Like, how did you get into blockchain? So for any students, like speaking specifically to students, that they can really see a path forward for this to be a real career. And, when we've done events with Hedera, coming on Zoom calls and talking to students, I think with blockchain still being so early stages, we're not walking down the street seeing a Chase Bank ATM, you don't see like a Hedera sign, when you go out on the street. So I think you maybe speaking directly to students like makes it tangible for them, like that this is an actual career path and that there are people working in this industry and what they are doing. So speaking directly to students, would love to hear from you. What's your background? How did you get into blockchain? And do you have any advice for students who are thinking of doing the same?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm a marketer by trade, and graduated with a marketing degree. It started off as really community management at open source database companies. So a pretty technical marketer by nature, and really, evolved from community management, which I think is a really good starting point for anybody within the marketing world. Because it gives you such an ample opportunity to be as close to the product and as close to the users as possible. And it's so cool to see some of the users that are just as excited about this technology as you are, and watch their careers grow, watch their deployments grow, and create some real relationships with them over time is really fun. And so after some years in community management, that's when I switched over to product marketing, which is a really good and interesting field that dives deeper into the broader market trends and how our messaging and what we do fits into those. A little bit more strategic perhaps than community management, and then sprinkled in some growth marketing as well, which is another fun area and kind of developing area within the marketing space. But most of my background in terms of corporations really comes from open source community management and developer tools. So worked with a number of the largest kind of database infrastructure solutions really in the world, with Apache Cassandra and Apache Kafka, that have some really avid communities built around them, which makes your job a ton easier. And then starting to get more and more into the distributed systems side of things, in security at Cloudflare, and then switching over to kind of this cryptoverse. So I've been at Hedera for about 3 years now, I believe. And certainly, some days it feels a lot shorter and some days it feels a lot longer than that. But I think what it comes down to really is just getting a start anywhere within the technology field, probably, or the technology sector, and just having, extreme curiosity. I found that, wanting to understand not only, how we're bringing these things to market, but how they work, and what excites developers and businesses about them, and kind of connecting those dots together to be, really exciting and a good way to break into the field. And then, you can do so much more after that. So even if you do want to get into blockchain, which you certainly can, and, get excited by, learn as much as you can about that, and start to have some activity and conversations with people in the space, whether that's on Twitter or just your own personal blog. I think there's so many opportunities to kind of interject yourself within these communities, especially, and really find your way in. So I encourage you to, learn and share what you've learned, and you'll be a success, I believe.
Absolutely. I think my main advice for students is just that adding that domain expertise to something that you're already passionate or good at. If you're a writer, start writing some blogs, create some educational materials for your fellow students, start a club. We have a leadership class on our online educational platform, just kind of trying to teach people like how to network, how to build communities around something that you're interested in. The best way to learn is to teach, do a workshop with your fellow students. If you're studying law, there's going to be a huge demand for crypto lawyers. If you're psychologists, communications people, we need all of these people in the space to build this technology. So adding kind of blockchain to your expertise, I think, is going to provide a lot of opportunity, and I think, as the space just grows.
Yeah, and to add on to that, I think it's also one of the key advantages that I think you can make is being dangerous enough on the other side of the world. So if you're a marketer, be dangerous enough at like writing just a little bit of code. Like, it doesn't have to be much, but just to write like a function in JavaScript is really a competitive advantage. And vice versa, if you're a developer, being able to write a nice blog post and communicate your thoughts effectively, having that kind of dual threat, I think, is a tremendous advantage that's pretty easy to pick up in the grand scheme of things.
Yeah, well, great advice. Thanks for sharing that. I want to make sure that we cover, kind of all of the most recent developments with Hedera and what's going on over there. Just recently, they announced that they are working with the Voluntary Ecological Markets Task Force to define standards for tokenization and, tokenizing carbon credits, creating standards around an ecological market. Can you talk to that?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I think we've seen it before where to basically have any of this technology reach mainstream adoption, it kind of starts and builds out with a standard. So whether that's, an ICO back in the day or an NFT or maybe these new ecological standards, you really have to start with that foundation and then build an ecosystem around it. And so this is, something that I think we're both very excited about and passionate about. Is creating this ability to really easily and transparently manage carbon credits. There's certainly a lot of interest in this space, and I think having a really verifiable way to define the ownership and exactly what that means, how it's being exchanged, is critical for anything like this effort to start to be developed. So I'm excited for us to partake in that, and then certainly from a technology perspective, being able to not only provide the infrastructure, but to actually kind of offset and go beyond that for what our network does itself, being so efficient, makes it really a no-brainer, especially as we start to build up such a big ecosystem around not just us, but the broader DLT and blockchain industry at large. So I think it's a really good effort that we're still figuring out in the early days. And again, encourage those entrepreneurs and developers to participate in it if that's something that they're passionate about as well.
Absolutely. And then the most recent project to select Hedera to build off of is Calaxy. What does Hedera offer this type of project compared to other platforms, and what is Calaxy doing on Hedera?
Yeah, so Calaxy, which is a portmanteau for Creators Galaxy, is building kind of a social media application that plans to be the platform for the future of the creator-based economy. So we've seen this start to rise with things, like Cameo and other platforms that allow for that direct engagement. Calaxy, which is founded by the NBA player Spencer Dinwiddie, actually, who I'm a huge fan of the NBA, and the Phoenix Suns are looking great right now, which gets me excited. But they're really trying to push that industry forward by creating more unique engagement offerings through really the own ability for any creator, artist, athlete to create their own kind of micro economy around their own individual token. And so at least for Calaxy, I believe they have over 100 plus creators already onboarded to the platform. People like Ezekiel Elliott, the NFL athlete, is on their website, and a few other names as well. And so for each of those, you can imagine the amount of scale that would go into being able to create a real functioning economy around that. And these are, everything from being able to send a message and encourage them to respond back to asking, what question should I wear in today's shoes? So these are, pretty small engagements that simply wouldn't, from a financial perspective, be popular on other networks like Ethereum, for instance. So I think for Calaxy, the ability to reliably scale that platform out, have tokens for each of these creators and have their ability to send those freely at a low cost that's predictable, and creating a positive user experience where I don't have to wait 30 seconds, a minute for a transaction to complete. I can know within 5 seconds whether that's final, is really a game changer for them, and we're certainly excited to have Spencer Dinwiddie and his team building on Hedera.
Yeah, that's super exciting. I had read about him, about Calaxy before, and I guess just recently they chose to build on Hedera. That's super cool. So speaking of like why this platform would be more attractive than, let's say, Ethereum, our theme this month is Game of Chains. We're kind of asking like, who's going to take the throne? Is there going to be an Ethereum killer? What is the state of the industry right now, and where do you think it's going? Can you talk a little bit about just your opinion of the Bitcoin ecosystem and the Ethereum ecosystem currently, and where do you think it's headed?
Yeah, so I will asterisk that these are all my personal views. So, Hedera, don't hold this against me. But, personally, what I'm against, I think, is any network or coin maximalist. That just doesn't make sense to me in the ethos of this space where we're, born out of being able to, freely exchange between these different networks. We should have the ability to encourage the development by each of them. Now, having said that, I do think there are some key use cases that simply can't be possible on some of these networks, either financially or ethically, whatever it might be, and should look to viable alternatives like Hedera. So I think what I see, I somehow think there's both too many and too few networks at the same time, and I think we should see some consolidation within that. Typically, markets break down into duopolies. Now, again, I don't see that happening in this space, given some of the inherent design that we have when it comes to interoperability and the encouragement to really have the best tool really win out. So I think we're still early in the shape of what makes sense where, but I think we'll eventually get to a clear idea where Hedera makes sense for these types of applications. Ethereum makes sense for these. Bitcoin as a store of value, I think, makes sense to me personally. So I think we'll start to see that work out. And I think, what's also interesting is I talked a little bit before about those kind of converging worlds, decentralized fully, which is being built much on Ethereum today and, Matic and these other networks, right? But then also the centralized world becoming more decentralized and those colliding. In many ways, I think Ethereum is doing a great job at building that developer community and network effects of these fully decentralized and autonomous kind of organizations and whatnot. And we're seeing Hedera come on this other side, right? Of starting to centralize this really important process that's critical infrastructure to the real world, I'll say, and start to see those worlds start to converge in a real battle, potentially break out on what's the right abstraction for that when it comes to decentralization, and what degree of decentralization makes sense. So I'm looking forward to that playing out. I am, both a fan of Hedera and Ethereum personally, and would encourage people to participate in, both of these worlds. I don't know if that's the answer you're looking for the soundbite, but that's my personal belief and philosophy in the space, and I'm excited to see where decentralization plays out and how we do a good job as a broader community of gaining adoption and mainstream momentum.
Yeah, I think that's kind of the question that we want to ask everyone for this series. Do you think that there'll be a consolidation of blockchains? Are there too many blockchains, or is there always room for more? And
yeah.
I think
Yeah, I mean, the short answer is yes. There's way too many blockchains trying to do very similar things. I think that's rather apparent. So I think especially at the layer 1 space, we'll see some consolidation. And then when we get to the layer 2 space, I think we will see some consolidation as we know it today. But what we'll also see is more use case specific applications or networks emerge that are more defined, more clearly defined, and start to support a vertical that's likely industry based as well.
absolutely. So besides Hedera, what is a third generation blockchain that you're really excited about or that you follow? Are there any, what projects are you keeping your eye on right now?
What projects am I keeping my eye on? Oh, that's a good question. I think, Hedera itself is starting to explore more validator networks and the type of, layer 2 that gives greater programmability on top of us and interoperability within there. So for things like Polkadot comes to mind as being a well-designed system, in my opinion, for creating some good incentives around that interoperability and cross-chain communication. I think that's a really exciting project that has some, good recent developments in terms of starting to launch those auctions and parachains. And then we also, of course, I think what Polygon and Matic are doing to start to build those validator networks as a layer 2 solution. And, Ethereum, that's for greater scalability. You can certainly build the equivalent on Hedera that provides more programmability since we already have much of the scalability at our layer 1. So those are, 2 projects that I think are really important in the space And we're starting to see, those use cases really be identified and give a better idea of where they fit within the market, and start to emulate the same kind of principles on Hedera, which is exciting.
Absolutely. Well, for anyone tuning in that is considering building on Hedera, tell them one more time how they can learn more, how they can participate in the Boost program.
Yeah, absolutely. For anything about Hedera, we are at hedera.com, hedera.com. We certainly welcome any type of involvement, whether that's an average community member, a developer, an enterprise. We are there for you. So within Hedera Boost, which is the startup program we run, or I run rather, that's at hedera.com/boost. You'll also see that in our top nav bar, I believe. And so feel free to sign up there. I would encourage people to look at our Discord if you're a developer, hedera.com/Discord. We have a really good and active community in there that puts thoughtful opinions on where this network is headed, how we should improve it. Really a community-driven effort there that's going on. And of course, you can follow us on Twitter as well at Hedera. And I'm at Gehrig Kunz if you'd like to chime in there.
Absolutely. Well, Gehrig Kunz, product marketing at Hedera, thank you so much for joining us at Reimagine 2021. And anyone who's just tuning in, we have a bunch of other interviews with other members of the Hedera team. Check out our YouTube channel, hit that subscribe button, and stay tuned for more from Reimagine 2021.
Thanks so much, Ashlie.
Thanks, Gehrig.